You know, I hate to talk about two players' careers like this, but it's kind of poetic, is it not? Let's go over the biggest conversation heading into the 2022 NHL Entry Draft from last year and discuss both of the guys that were taken at the draft months after that had been made. Now, we had made a video about the 5 months later thing like a month ago, so this isn't really anything new. But with the recent developments in both of these guys' stories from the last few weeks up until the last few days, pretty much, I feel like the entire conversation gets changed up so drastically that this may be the one final time we talk about this in 2022-2023. Of course, it's 2023 now, but what I'm referring to is the season itself. Let's head over to the Montreal Canadiens' first overall pick in 2022 and talk about the choice they made to take one Juraj Slafkovsky over Shane Wright. Now, Wright versus Slafkovsky had been a conversation that was transcending the 2022 draft date. We had been talking about this entire thing weeks in advance, before the draft even began, and it was always a question of who the Canadiens would end up selecting with their first overall pick. Of course, we know who they went with. They took Juraj Slafkovsky, and throughout the year, we had been making videos updating the situation with both of these guys, how they've been performing, since, you know, there's always going to be an eternal link between these two players, considering they were both highly touted prospects to go first overall. Shane Wright, unfortunately, did not even go second or third. He went fourth to Seattle. But when you take a look at the conversation about these two guys today, it's oddly poetic how both of their NHL campaigns in 2022-2023 seem to have come to an end, albeit in very different ways. Let's go over to Juraj Slafkovsky because he has the latest update as to what has been going on with him and his profile, because just a few days ago we had ourselves a press conference done by one Kent Hughes, the GM of the team, where he provided the media with some updates about the team and their situation with injuries, and included is a conversation about Juraj Slafkovsky. Turns out the guy has a leg injury, and he's going to be out for 3 months. Fortunately for Canadiens fans that are looking at this, there is no surgery required. This will heal on its own, or at least that's what the word appears to be at the moment. However, 3 months from now is a pretty long time, from January to February to March to April. And if you assume the Montreal Canadiens are not going to make the Stanley Cup Playoffs, it's a safe assumption to make that if Juraj Slafkovsky sticks to this timeline of being out for 3 months on the dot, his 22-23 year is probably over. Which means that if we go over to Slafkovsky's profile and we look at the season he had, he finishes off the rookie campaign with 10 points in 39 games played, 4 goals, 6 assists, a -13. Had he played the full season, he would have been on pace for about 20 points in 76 games played, but of course this number isn't calculating the games that he is going to miss. But I think holistically, there's many different avenues we could explore when talking about Juraj and his first overall rookie season. Oh, should the guy have been playing in the NHL or the AHL? Would it have been more appropriate to send him to the World Juniors? This and that and everything. If you take a look at just the numbers by itself, this stat line is not impressive in the slightest. 10 points, 39 games. Like, what the hell? Even Alexis Lafreniere had more points than that in Lafreniere's rookie season. And I'm not even talking about points or points per game or whatever. It's just straight up, Lafreniere had a better season than Slafkovsky did. Now, of course, there are external circumstances. Montreal is still a bad team. Lafreniere is on a Rangers squad that was kind of gifted the first overall pick. I'm not going to go out there and deny that. And the expectations for Juraj definitely weren't in the same stratosphere as the expectations for guys like Jack Hughes and Alexis Lafreniere heading into the season, where people saw these franchise-defining first overall players in 2019-20. We thought they would be able to make immediate impacts, 50-plus points in their NHL rookie years, and that did not happen. And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, depending on who you ask, for Juraj Slafkovsky, there was not that same level of expectations for this guy. We knew he was a big, powerful dude that was a lot different than all the other first overall picks that had been taken in the past. And there was always this transitory period that people knew that Slafkovsky would need to exhibit, because in the Finnish league, he wasn't amazing until he was. At the World Championships, the Olympics, he was amazing pretty much the entire time. We knew there was an element of skill to his game where he could just snipe goals and take control of shifts and everything, but there were so many other parts of his game that he needed to iron out that, sure, even though this guy's 18 years old, you know there's a lot of development that needs to go through his mind, and that starts with just getting familiar with the NHL game and learning what exactly it is to be a player at this level, right? So even though he didn't produce all too much, that was okay. Nobody really went out there and said that Slafkovsky was the wrong pick, quote-unquote, even though there were the arguments saying, okay, well, Slafkovsky versus Wright probably could have gone first overall too. But it's very interesting because when you acknowledge that Slafkovsky's season is done, and admittedly, he didn't really have the best season, but it was a good enough season, I feel like, when you take a look at it from a developmental standpoint, just in terms of what he was able to learn and how he was able to adapt. Sure, he wasn't perfect, but there was progress made, and that in and of itself is most likely what Kent Hughes and co. are looking for. When it comes to Shane Wright, though, this guy had a completely different type of development story for 22-23 that I feel like it contrasts so heavily, yet in the most divisive way possible. The reason I say that is because where Juraj Slafkovsky was given pretty much most of the opportunities he could have been given to play NHL minutes, miss out on the World Juniors, and actually put a lot of emphasis on his NHL time, you have Shane Wright, who was pretty much given the exact opposite. When he did play in the NHL, he was limited to like less than 10 minutes of time on ice per game. He didn't play enough games actually to burn off a year on his ELC contract. Instead, the Kraken scratched him for a while, gave him enough time being scratched, which allowed him to get sent down to the AHL, brought him back up to the Kraken, played him against Montreal, he scored a goal, sent him off to World Junior Camp, and then sent him back down to the OHL after that, wherein he got traded from Kingston to Windsor. A much better team offensively, and a team that will allow Shane Wright to actually capitalize and grow his offensive game, something that was kind of critiqued about last year when discussing his season with the Frontenacs. This was almost perfect, the way the Seattle Kraken traversed this entire Shane Wright thing, and it differs so much from what we had seen out of Juraj Slafkovsky, where the Canadiens refused to send him away. They did not want to send this guy to the World Juniors. He didn't play in Laval. He had stuck around with the main Canadiens the whole time. Sure, he wasn't given the most minutes in the world, but they gave him opportunities. Marty St. Louis made sure that Juraj Slafkovsky was actually a part of the lineup. It's not like he was getting as few minutes as Shane Wright was getting, and so it was almost exactly the opposite type of development path comparative to Wright. You have one guy who was given all the opportunities to play in the NHL, you have the other guy who was playing pretty much everywhere else, to the extent that his NHL ELC wasn't even burned off on a year. And so even though these two guys might be in completely different circumstances right now, one is injured, one is in the CHL, I feel like there still is such a nice parallel link between both of these guys and their seasons that the Wright versus Slafkovsky arguments and debates still have an opportunity to present themselves for Season 2 next year. And I guess we have ourselves an opportunity to make videos when these guys start facing off against each other and they start producing actually at the NHL level, because I feel like it's going to happen eventually, right? Like, I'd been talking this whole time about how even though Slafkovsky has all these things to work on, he's still good enough to play in the NHL and be a somewhat effective middle six caliber guy, and he's only 18. So you just got to work on that offense, make sure that he still has that offensive drive, that offensive creativity and mindset that he had showed off in other levels of play in his draft year, and just hope that that really translates and carries itself forward into National Hockey League gameplay. That's ultimately what you want out of Slafkovsky, because if you get this right, if this development thing goes properly, you're looking at a guy that kind of plays in a similar mold to Rick Nash in a way. Obviously, that's a high ceiling to have. I mean, the guy's a former Rocket Richard winner, but at the end of the day, Slafkovsky was taken first overall. You got to have high expectations for guys taken that high up in the draft. So, ton of the comments are your thoughts about this entire Juraj Slafkovsky versus Shane Wright thing. How long had it been? Okay, so July, August, September, October, November, December, January. It's been 7 months. So 2 months ago, we did the 5 months later type of video. What are your thoughts now, considering one is not in the NHL because of injury, and the other is not in the NHL because he got sent down? What are your thoughts on the development of both of these guys so far, the differing styles of how the Kraken and the Canadiens did their things? What are your thoughts on who got the better end of the stick? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this. But it's Juraj Slafkovsky, and bye.